Hey everyone, welcome back to English Inside Out. Today's episode is about something that almost every English learner has struggled with, and usually more than once. Because it's simple, it looks easy, but when you're actually speaking, you hesitate. Today we're talking about say versus tell, and if you've ever stopped in the middle of a sentence thinking, do I say me, or tell me? Then yeah, this episode is definitely for you.
Yeah, and this is one of those topics where learners often know the rule, but still make mistakes in real conversations.
Exactly. Because you might remember something like, tell someone, say something, but when you're speaking fast, that rule disappears.
And your brain just goes, wait, what sounds natural here? Let's imagine a simple situation. You're talking to a friend, and you say, she said me the truth.
And again, people might understand you, but something feels off.
Now compare that with, she told me the truth.
Same idea, same message. But now it sounds completely natural. And here's the interesting part. The difference between say and tell is not really about meaning.
Yeah, both are about communication. Both are about speaking.
But they behave differently. And that's where learners get confused.
So let's simplify this from the beginning. Say means it focuses on the words. Tell means it focuses on the person receiving the message.
Yeah, and that idea already helps a lot, because now you're not just choosing randomly. You're choosing based on focus. Because think about this. When you say something, you're describing what was said.
But when you tell someone something, you're describing who received the information.
For example, she said something interesting.
Focus means it is about the words.
Now, she told me something interesting.
Now, the focus includes the person, and this is why you can't say, she said me, because say doesn't connect directly to a person like that.
Exactly, that's the role of tell.
So in this episode, we're not just going to give you rules.
We're going to explore how say is used in real life, how tell is used in real life, why some sentences feel natural and others don't, and how to choose automatically when you speak. And by the end of this episode, you won't stop in the middle of your sentence anymore.
You'll just know what sounds right. All right, so let's start with the most important difference.
Because once you understand this, everything else becomes much easier.
All right, so let's slow this down a little bit, because this is one of those moments where, if you really understand what's happening here, everything else becomes much easier. And I think this is important to say. A lot of learners try to memorize rules like, say something, tell someone something. And yes, that rule is correct. But the problem is, if you only memorize it, you still hesitate when you speak.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you're in a real conversation, you don't have time to go, okay, what was the rule again? You're thinking about what you want to say. You're reacting. You're listening. And suddenly your brain needs to choose quickly. And if the idea is not clear in your mind, that's where the confusion starts.
So instead of starting with rules, let's go back to the core idea. Say focuses on the message, tell focuses on the person receiving it. And I want you to really feel this, because this is not just grammar, it's perspective.
Yeah, it's about what you're paying attention to. Are you thinking about the words, or are you thinking about the person? Let's look at something simple. She said something interesting. Here, the focus is clearly on the words. We don't know who she said it to. We don't really care in this moment. The important thing is the message.
Yeah, and this is very common in English. You often hear sentences like, he said something funny. They said it was a bad idea. She said she was tired. In all of these, the focus is on what was said.
Now let's change the perspective. She told me something interesting. Now the focus changes. Now it's not just about the words. It's about the communication between people.
Exactly. Now we have speaker plus listener. And this is the key difference. Tell almost always connects to a person. And this is where the most common mistake comes from. Learners try to combine both ideas and say something like, she said me.
Yeah, and this is one of those mistakes that is super common, because logically, it makes sense. You're thinking, she said something to me. So your brain tries to build, she said me,
But English doesn't work like that. Say doesn't connect directly to a person. If you want to include the person, you need a different structure. So you have two options. She said something to me. She told me something.
Yeah, and both are correct. But again, they feel slightly different. When you say, she said something to me, the focus is still more on the words. The to me is just extra information.
But when you say, she told me something, now the person becomes central to the sentence.
Let's imagine a situation. You come back from a meeting, and someone asks, "What happened?"
You might say, he said the project is delayed. Now you're just reporting information.
But now imagine, what did he tell you? Now the focus is different. Now it's about you receiving the information.
And this is why, even though say and tell are similar, they are not interchangeable because they organize the sentence differently. They highlight different parts of the situation.
Let's look at a few more examples. She said she was tired. She told me she was tired. First one, general information.
Second one, personal communication.
And this is where your English starts to feel more natural. Because you're not just choosing words, you're choosing how to present the information.
All right, so now that we understand this core idea,
Let's go deeper, because this is where learners get confused again.
all right, so now that we've built that foundation, this idea of focus, words versus person, message versus receiver, let's take that idea and bring it into real life. Because this is where things start to feel more natural, and also where a lot of learners realize, oh, I've been using this differently than native speakers. And I think this is important to say. Say is actually very simple in structure, but it's also very specific in how it's used. And if you don't notice those patterns, you end up either avoiding it or using it in slightly unnatural ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of learners feel more comfortable with tell because it feels more direct. You say something to someone, it's very clear. But say is more flexible. And sometimes that flexibility creates confusion because you're not always sure, do I need a person here? Do I need two? Can I just stop the sentence? And that's exactly what we're going to clarify now.
So let's start with one of the most common uses of say, reporting information. This is when you're telling someone what another person said, but you're not focusing on who received it. You're focusing on what was said. And this is extremely common in everyday English, like all the time. For example, she said she was tired. He said the meeting was canceled. They said it's going to rain. Now notice something important here. There is no person in the sentence. We're not saying who they told, we're just reporting the message.
Yeah, and this is actually very natural because in many situations, the person receiving the message is not important. Let's imagine you're talking to a friend. You say, "My boss said we have a deadline tomorrow." You don't need to say to me, it's obvious. The focus is the information.
And this is something learners sometimes overthink. They try to include every detail. My boss said to me that, and that's not wrong, but in real conversation, it often sounds unnecessary.
Yeah, native speakers usually simplify. They remove what's obvious and keep the focus on the message. Now let's look at another very important use of say. And this one is everywhere in daily conversation. Short expressions. For example, say hello, say thank you, say sorry, say something. In all of these, you are focusing on the words themselves.
Yeah, and this is a really clean example of how say works, because you're not describing a full conversation. You're describing the act of producing words. So when you say, you should say sorry, you're not talking about the whole situation. You're focusing on that specific expression.
And this is why you don't say, tell sorry, tell hello, because tell needs a person. But here, the focus is just the words. Let's imagine a situation. Your friend did something wrong, and you say, you should say sorry.
Now compare that with, you should tell her you're sorry. Now the structure changes, because now you have a person plus a message. Now this is where things get a bit more subtle, and also where learners get confused again. say plus person. Because we said earlier, say doesn't connect directly to a person, but that doesn't mean you can't include a person. You just need a connector. 2. For example, she said something to me. He said that to her. I said hello to him. Now this is correct, because the structure is say plus something plus to someone.
Yeah. And this is where learners sometimes mix things up, because they try to skip that too. They say, she said me something. But that doesn't work. You need the to.
So if you want to include a person with say, always remember, you go through the message first, then you add the person with to. Let's imagine. What did you say to her?
That sounds completely natural.
But if you say, what did you say her? It immediately sounds wrong to a native speaker.
So if we simplify everything about say, focus on the message, often no person needed if there is a person. Use to.
Yeah. And once you feel that pattern, say becomes much easier to use. All right. So now that we've explored how say works,
Let's move to the other side, because this is where the contrast becomes even clearer.
all right. So now that we've spent some time really understanding how say works, the idea of focusing on the message, on the words themselves, on reporting information, let's shift our perspective a little bit, because now we're moving into something that feels similar on the surface, but behaves very differently once you start using it in real conversations. Tell, and I think this is where a lot of learners feel confident, but still make small mistakes, because the difference is subtle, but very consistent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think tell actually feels easier at first, because it's more direct. It's more structured. There's usually a person involved. There's usually a clear direction, and that gives learners a sense of control. But at the same time, if you don't fully understand how it works, you might start using it in places where say would sound more natural.
So let's go back to the core idea again, but now focusing on tell. Tell is about communication between people. It's about passing information from one person to another, and because of that, it almost always includes the listener.
Yeah, that's the key difference. With say, the person is optional. With tell, the person is usually essential. So let's start with the most important structure. Tell someone something. This is the pattern you'll see again and again in real life. And once this becomes natural for you, a lot of confusion disappears. For example, she told me the truth. He told us a story. They told her the news. In all of these, the structure is very clear. Person plus message.
Yeah, and notice how direct it is. There's no to, there's no extra connector. It goes straight to the person. And this is exactly why you can't say, tell something to someone, in the same way. Because tell already includes that direction.
Yeah, it already carries the idea of giving information to someone. Let's imagine a situation. You're talking to a friend and you say, she told me something interesting yesterday. Now the focus is very clear. You received the information. Now the focus is very clear. You received the information.
Exactly. And that's why it feels more personal than say. Now let's look at another very important use of tell. And this one is extremely common in real life, instructions and directions. For example, she told me to wait. He told us to sit down. They told her to call later. In all of these, someone is guiding someone else's action.
Yeah. And this is a really important difference from say, because here, the communication leads to action. You're not just sharing information, you're influencing behavior. Let's imagine. My boss told me to finish the report today. That's not just information. That's instruction, that's expectation.
Now compare that with, my boss said I should finish the report. Now it feels softer, more like a suggestion. So even when the meaning is similar, tell feels more direct, say feels more descriptive.
Now let's look at something very important, because these are expressions you'll hear all the time. Fixed expressions with tell. For example, tell the truth, tell a lie, tell a story, tell the difference in all of these. Tell is used as a standard pattern.
Yeah, and this is where trying to translate directly doesn't work, because you might think, why not say the truth? But English has preferred combinations, and these combinations sound natural to native speakers.
So sometimes it's not about logic, it's about patterns you get used to. Let's imagine someone asks, "Is he being honest?"
You might say, I think he's telling the truth.
That sounds completely natural.
And there's one more layer here that I think is really interesting. Tell often feels more direct, more personal, because it involves people directly.
Yeah, it creates a stronger connection. Because now it's not just words in the air, it's communication between people. Compare. She said something important. She told me something important. Second one feels more personal, more direct, more connected.
So if we simplify everything about tell, person is central, communication is direct, often leads to action or understanding.
Yeah, and once you feel that, choosing between say and tell becomes much easier.
All right, so now we've explored both sides.
Say and tell in real life.
Now let's bring everything together. All right, so now that we've taken the time to really understand how say works and how tell works, this is where everything starts to come together. Because in real life, you're not thinking, okay, this is a say sentence. This is a tell sentence. You're just speaking. You're reacting. You're telling a story. You're explaining something. And your brain needs to choose naturally.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why these side-by-side comparisons are so important, because they help you feel the difference, not just understand it. And once you've seen enough of these, your brain starts choosing automatically. Let's start with the most basic comparison. She said something. She told me something. First one, the focus is on the message.
Second one, the focus includes the person. Let's imagine you're telling a story. She said something really strange during the meeting. Now the listener is curious about what she said.
Now imagine. She told me something really strange during the meeting. Now the focus changes. It becomes more personal. It involves you directly.
So again, say means message, tell means communication between people. Now this is a very practical one. You should say sorry. You should tell her you're sorry. Both are correct, but they don't feel exactly the same.
Yeah. Say sorry feels shorter, more general. You're focusing on the words. But tell her you're sorry feels more complete, more personal, more direct, more intentional. Let's imagine your friend made a mistake. You might say, "You should say sorry."
Now imagine the situation is more serious. You need to tell her you're sorry. Now it feels stronger, more direct. So sometimes both are possible, but they create slightly different tones.
Now let's go back to reporting information. He said he was tired. He told me he was tired. First one, general information.
Second one, personal communication. What happened after the meeting? He said the project is delayed.
Now, what did he tell you? He told me the project is delayed. Same information, different perspective.
Now this is where structure becomes really important. She said something to me. She told me something. Both are correct, but notice how they are built differently.
Yeah, with say, you need to, but with tell, you go directly to the person. She said something to me yesterday.
Now compare. She told me something yesterday. Second one feels more direct, more natural in many situations. So this is a key takeaway. Say means it needs to, before the person. Tell means it goes directly to the person.
Now let's look at something more subtle. Tone and intensity. Compare. She said something important. She told me something important. The second one feels stronger, more personal, more impactful.
Yeah, because now you are part of the communication. So sometimes choosing tell makes the sentence feel more direct and meaningful. All right, now let's look at some very common mistakes.
Yeah, the kind that don't stop communication, but immediately sound unnatural.
She said me the truth.
She told me the truth. He told that he was tired.
He said that he was tired. He told me that he was tired. She said me something.
She said something to me. She told me something. Tell sorry.
Say sorry. Tell her you're sorry. And if you notice, all these mistakes come from the same confusion. Message versus person structure versus meaning.
So let's simplify everything again. Say means it focus on the words. Tell means it focus on the person.
And structurally, say something to someone, tell someone something. All right? So now let's bring everything together.
And make this practical before we finish.
All right. So before we finish, let's take a step back for a moment, because we've looked at a lot today. Different structures, different situations, different ways these two verbs behave in real life. And when you put all of that together, you start to see something important. This is not just about two verbs. It's really about how communication works in English, what you choose to focus on, what you choose to highlight, and how you organize information when you speak.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where things become much clearer. Because instead of thinking, which word is correct, you start thinking, what am I focusing on here? Am I focusing on the words? Or am I focusing on the person? And that shift makes a huge difference. So let's simplify everything. One last time. Say means it focuses on the message. Tell means it focuses on the person.
And structurally, say something to someone, tell someone something. And if you ever feel unsure in the moment, and you're speaking, and your brain hesitates, just pause for a second and ask yourself, is the person important in this sentence? If yes, tell is probably the better choice. If not, say is usually enough.
So here's a simple way to think about it. If you're reporting words, use say. If you're directing communication to someone, use tell. And honestly, the more you listen to real English, the more this becomes automatic.
Because natural English is not just about knowing vocabulary.
It's about understanding how people actually communicate meaning.
All right, that's it for today.
Yeah, this was a really important one.
And this is one of those topics where, once it clicks, you stop second-guessing yourself.
And before we go, what's one sentence you're not sure about, say or tell?
Yeah, write it in the comments, and we'll help you make it sound natural.
And if this episode helped you, share it with someone who always says, she said me.
And don't forget to subscribe for real English, real conversations.
And real progress.
See you in the next episode.
Bye, guys.